Hockey was played in buildings that felt carved from the soul of their cities. These were places of steel and stone with steep sightlines and echoing rafters.
The Edmonton Oilers have won it again.
Each one held more than ice, they held history. And though many have been replaced or demolished, their legacy lives on in the roar of the crowd, the crack of the puck, and the frozen breath of winter nights where heroes were made. Welcome back to TFC Stadiums. My name is Mike, and this is NHL Stadiums that no longer exist. Part 2. In 1955, the Winnipeg Warriors needed a new place to call home. Their current home, the aging Shays Amphitheater, originally constructed in 1908 and not to be confused with Shea Stadium in New York City, was no longer a suitable home for the team. The Winnipeg Arena opened in the fall of 1955 and gave the Warriors of the Western Hockey League a new home. But no one could have expected that this new arena would become so much for the people of Winnipeg. It became a gathering place for the city and a stage for some of its most memorable moments. From the outside, the arena was all business. It featured a curved roof, a concrete shell, and a design that reflected the post-war focus on function over flair. Inside, it started with about 9,500 seats and later expanded to over 15,000. It was a prime example of how even a simple design can be better than extravagant. The sightlines were excellent and the atmosphere on game nights was electric. Winnipeg fans and locals lovingly called it the Barn. The name stuck, partly because of the building's rugged look, but mostly because of the energy it held. It wasn't fancy and it wasn't trying to be, but it was loud, loyal, and full of heart. And for generations of Winnipeggers, it was a place where memories were made. The arena was also home to the original Winnipeg Jets, first in the WHA starting in 1972 and later in the NHL starting in 1979. It also hosted international matchups, including games from the 1974 Summit Series between Canada and the Soviet Union. Besides hockey, Winnipeg Arena was host to some legendary musical acts, including Van Halen in 1980, Stevie Wonder in '86, Aerosmith in 1990, and others. But by the late 90s, the Barn was looking as though it had seen better days. The arena lacked modern amenities and couldn't keep pace with newer venues. When the Jets relocated to Phoenix in 1996, fans and residents knew it marked the beginning of the end. The MTS Center opened downtown a decade later on November 16, 2004, the same year that the Winnipeg Arena closed its doors for good. Its final event was a Manitoba Moose game, and demolition came a short time later in 2006.
It was loud, but not enough to bring down the house. The main cement pillars and steel girders still standing.
The Motor City is no stranger when it comes to sports legends and iconic arenas. The Joe Louis Arena is a prime example. Opened in 1979, the arena was built by the city of Detroit to keep the legendary Red Wings from relocating. Named after the legendary heavyweight boxing champion and Detroit native, the arena quickly became one of the most iconic hockey venues in North America. For nearly 4 decades, it stood at the edge of the Detroit River, hosting unforgettable games, concerts, and moments that helped define the city's sports identity. Designed by Michigan-based firm Smith, Hinchman and Grills Associates, the arena reflected the functionalist style of the late 70s. It was boxy, looked industrial, and built for purpose. It featured a steel and concrete frame, a stark exterior, and a bowl-shaped interior that created excellent sightlines and a tight, intense atmosphere. At its peak, the arena sat over 20,000 fans with 21,000 seats available for entertainment events. It hosted college tournaments, wrestling events, civic gatherings, and concerts from artists like Prince, U2, and Madonna. It wasn't just a sports arena, it was part of Detroit's cultural rhythm at this point. And while other arenas and stadiums were adding unique amenities for guests, the Joe Louis Arena kept it simple, with basic concession stands and a few bars for fans. Fans lovingly called the arena the Joe. Under the ownership of Mike Ilitch and the leadership of star players like Steve Yzerman, Sergei Fedorov, and Nicholas Lidstrom, the Red Wings won 4 Stanley Cups in '97, '98, 2002, and 2008 while calling the arena home. The arena's playoff energy was legendary, punctuated by the tradition of octopuses tossed onto the ice, original as wild as it is beloved. By the 2010s, the cracks were showing. The Joe lacked amenities that made newer venues just more attractive. Modern features like luxury boxes and updated concessions and newer venues were just raising the bar. In 2017, the Red Wings played their final game at the Joe before moving to Little Caesars Arena. The farewell was emotional for players, fans, and the city saying goodbye to a place that held so many memories. Joe Louis Arena was demolished in 2019 as part of a broader redevelopment of the downtown waterfront. It was a monument to Detroit's resilience, pride, and passion, and for those who filled its seats, it will always be remembered as one of hockey's greatest homes. Officially opening in 1949, Le Colisée Quebec, later called Le Colisée Pepsi, was built to replace the aging Quebec Arena, originally built in 1913 and destroyed by fire in 1942. Constructed on the same site as the previous arena, it gave the city a modern venue for hockey and public events. Later dubbed the house that Belleville built, it quickly became the heart of sports and entertainment in Quebec City. The original structure followed a mid-century functionalist style, concrete frame, wide-arching roof, and a layout that prioritized clear sightlines over ornament. In 1980, the arena underwent a major renovation to prepare for the arrival of the NHL's Quebec Nordiques. Seating expanded from 10,000 to over 15,000, and the building gained a few modern touches. The original entrance was replaced with a modern glass facade. The Nordiques made Le Colisée their home, first in the WHA starting in 1972, and then in the NHL from 1979 onward. The arena became a fortress, known for its passionate fans and the electric energy of the Battle of Quebec games against the Montreal Canadiens.
De Savage qui tombe devant le bord des Nordiques. Là, c'est la pointe qui frappe Savage, et là, Denman qui s'implique et la bagarre est partie. À deux sur le même joueur. Est-ce qu'il y aura un deuxième homme?
During the 1980s and early 90s, those matchups turned the building into one of the most intense hockey environments in North America. Outside of battles on the ice, Le Colisée hosted concerts, circus, wrestling events, and international figure skating competitions. Its location within the Expo Cité complex made it accessible and deeply woven into Quebec City's urban core. By the 2010s, the 61-year-old venue's cracks were showing. In 2015, it was replaced by Center Videotron, a state-of-the-art facility built nearby with the hopes of bringing the NHL back to Quebec City. In September 2015, the band Metallica played at Le Colisée as the last major event held in the arena. After sitting vacant for a decade, the city finally announced plans in 2025 to demolish the historic venue, with plans for newer real estate developments to be constructed. Few arenas in hockey's history have more importance than the Denman Arena in Vancouver. The Denman Arena opened in December of 1911 at the corner of Denman and West Georgia Streets and was built by hockey pioneers Frank and Lester Patrick. Designed by architect Thomas Hooper, it was one of the most ambitious arena projects in Canada at the time. The building featured a wood frame structure with a brick facade and a clear span roof that offered unobstructed sightlines. But the arena's most unique and revolutionary feature was the ice. Denman Arena was the first indoor arena in Canada and among the first in the world to use mechanically frozen ice. That innovation changed everything. It meant hockey could be played anytime regardless of weather, and it helped shape the sport's future on the Pacific Coast. With a seating capacity of around 10,500, Denman was the largest indoor arena in Canada when it opened, and one of the largest in North America. It wasn't just a hockey rink, even if it was designed for the sport too. It housed curling rinks in the basement, it had private boxes, multiple entrances, and an upper-level balcony. The ammonia-based refrigeration system used to make the ice was state-of-the-art. As one of the oldest arenas, Denman Arena had never hosted an NHL game, but it was central to the early professional hockey. It was home to the Vancouver Millionaires of the Pacific Coast Hockey Association, a league founded by the Patrick brothers to rival the East. In 1915, the Millionaires won the Stanley Cup at Denman, sweeping the Ottawa Senators in a 3-game series. It remains the only time a Vancouver-based team had officially won the cup. Denman Arena also helped shape the game itself. The Patrick brothers introduced innovations like the blue line, the goal crease, and forward passing, rules tested at Denman and later adopted by the NHL. In that way, the arena became one of the birthplaces of what modern hockey really is, both strategy and structure. Tragically, on August 20th, 1936, a fire at a nearby industrial building spread too quickly to the arena. The wood construction of the Denman fueled the inferno, and the historic building was destroyed. 2 lives were lost, and 3 firemen fighting the fire were injured. The arena was never rebuilt, taking with it the legacy of its contributions to the game of hockey, and the site eventually became part of Devonian Harbor Park. The Northland Coliseum, or Edmonton Coliseum as referred to by the locals, opened in 1974, built on the Northland's exhibition grounds as part of a larger civic vision for entertainment and agriculture in Western Canada. Designed by the Canadian architectural firm Phillips Barrett Hillier Jones and Partners, the arena was a bold $17.3 million Canadian dollar investment, a reflection on Edmonton's growing aspirations in professional sports and public life. Architecturally, the Coliseum was a marvel of engineering. Its hyperbolic paraboloid roof with a swooping saddle-like structure supported by perimeter steel columns allowed for a column-free interior with excellent sightlines. The oval-shaped seating bowl was steep and tightly wrapped around the ice, creating an intimate and intimidating atmosphere. It originally seated around 15,000 fans for hockey, later expanded to 16,839, 4 main entrances, and a full concourse made circulation just seamless. And while the design wasn't lavish, it was incredibly efficient and symmetrical. The Oilers moved in while still a part of the World Hockey Association. When the WHA merged with the NHL in 1979, the Coliseum began hosting NHL games. That was the year the greatest sports legend arrived, Wayne Gretzky. The building became the stage for one of the greatest dynasties in hockey history. Gretzky, Mark Messier, Paul Coffey, Jari Kurri, and Grant Fuhr turned the Coliseum into a launchpad for 5 Stanley Cups: 1984, 85, 87, 88, and 90. The arena became synonymous with fast, offensive hockey and record-breaking nights. Fans packed the building night after night. The nosebleed section was filled with passionate supporters whose energy reverberated throughout the structure. The ice surface, kept cold under ideal Edmonton conditions, was widely praised for its quality. And when Gretzky played his final game as an Oiler in 1988, the tearful press conference announcing his trade to Los Angeles was held in the Coliseum's bowl.
I promised Miss I wouldn't do this.
It was a moment that showed how deeply this building had become a stage not just for the sport, but for the emotional highs and lows of Canadian identity. Over the years, the Coliseum went through several name changes: Edmonton Coliseum in 1995, Skyreach Center in 98, and Rexall Place in 2003. Renovations in the 90s and early 2000s added luxury boxes, upgraded lighting, and refreshed concourses. But the steep seating, tight acoustics, and hockey-first design remained the same. The Oilers would play their final game at the Coliseum on April 6, 2016. The farewell was emotional and ceremonial, with appearances by many of the franchise's all-time greats. The building officially closed in 2017, and demolition was approved by the City Council in 2020, despite suggestions to repurpose the venue. By 2023, plans were underway to redevelop the ground. The Coliseum may be gone, but its legacy remains profound. It was the birthplace of one of the NHL's most dominant dynasties. It was where Wayne Gretzky became a global icon, and for over 4 decades it stood as a beacon of architectural ambition, civic pride, and hockey excellence in the heart of Edmonton. The city of Boston loves their stadiums as much as they love their teams. The Boston Garden wasn't just an arena, it was an important part of culture for the city of Boston. From its opening in 1928 to its final game in 1995, it stood atop North Station like a crown of sweat and sound, hosting decades of hockey, basketball, boxing, and memory. The arena was originally dubbed the Boston Madison Square Garden before being shortened to the simpler Boston Garden. The venue was born from the vision of boxing promoter and New York Rangers founder Tex Rickard's vision. He wanted every seat close enough to see the sweat on a boxer's brow. He wanted fans to feel like they were practically in the ring, on the ice, or beside the bench. The bowl design carried that closeness into hockey and basketball, creating a visceral connection between crowd and competition. Architecturally, the Boston Garden wasn't exactly impressive. Sightlines were blocked by structural columns, air conditioning was absent for most of its life, and the concourses were famously narrow. But somehow, the flaws actually became memorable features. The noise bounced off the walls and the energy of the fans just condensed. With a hockey capacity hovering around 14,400, the Boston Garden was small by normal standards. But fewer seats meant more intensity. The Bruins, who called the Boston Garden home from 1928 to 95, thrived in the atmosphere of fewer and more intense fans. Rivalries with the Canadiens and Leafs echoed through its rafters. The team would go on to win Stanley Cups in 1939 against the Leafs and 1970 against the St. Louis Blues. By the 80s, the simplicity of Boston Garden simply wasn't cutting it for modern fans, though. There were no luxury boxes, climate control, or modern amenities, but what it lacked in polish, it did make up for in presence. The parquet floor, the fog on the ice, and the rumble of trains beneath, it was an unmistakably Boston arena. But no amount of presence would prevent the inevitable. The garden was ultimately demolished in 1998, with TD Garden carrying the torch for the city of Boston now.
How long have you been working here?
Too long, 28 years.
Sorry to see you go.
Yes,
What do you think of Fleet Center?
gorgeous. Fans will love it. All the comforts, a little bit more expensive, but they'll forget this place, they won't forget the memories.
Few arenas had the intimidation factor from the exterior than the Omni Coliseum. The Omni was Atlanta's leap into creating a modern sports complex for its downtown. It was forged in steel and was a spectacle. As a multi-use venue, it was built as part of the broader Omni complex. It opened in October 1972, anchoring a vision of civic pride, hotels, convention halls, and retail buzz. To say that the Omni was an architectural marvel is an understatement. The bold vision was based on the design by Atlanta-based firm Thompson, Ventilate, Steinbeck & Associates with TVS Design. It wore a skin of Core-10 weathering steel meant to rust gracefully into permanence. Its roof, called an ortho-quad truss system, looked like a giant waffle iron. Though the designers hoped the roof would rust gracefully, Georgia's humid climate had other plans. The steel corroded beyond control, and the building's boldness actually became its burden. Inside, the bowl was compact, with around 15,000 for hockey and 16,000 for basketball. The compactness of the Omni made fans feel like they were part of the action no matter where they purchased tickets. In 1972, the short-lived Atlanta Flames made the Omni their home. It was a bold move. Hockey in the Sun Belt, northern traditions, skating into southern soil. But with poor attendance numbers and unimpressive games, the Flames didn't last. They became the Calgary Flames in 1980, but their presence marked a turning point, and the Omni became a beacon for hockey's expansion. Beyond hockey, the Omni thrived. It was the home for the Atlanta Hawks, Olympic volleyball in 1996, and played host to many concerts. But by the 1990s, the steel that used to give the Omni a dramatic look was causing problems. Rust tracked the walls and leaks eventually formed, and additionally fans wanted luxury suites, better sightlines, and modern amenities. In 1997, the Omni closed, demolished, and was later replaced by the Phillips Arena in 1999. But the Omni's design left many lessons for future builds when it comes to climate and building materials. The Capitol Center opened on December 2, 1973, just outside Washington, D.C. in Landover, Maryland. Conceived by philanthropist, businessman, and team owner Abe Pollan, it was built as a multi-use facility to be a home for both basketball and professional hockey. It costed $18 million and a design credited to the Shaver Partnership from Michigan, Indiana. The saddle-shaped roof, similar to the style of the Northland Coliseum in Edmonton, gave it a futuristic silhouette. Inside, it introduced features that would become industry standards: the first center-hung video screen, luxury skyboxes, and computerized ticketing. At its peak, the arena seated over 18,000 for both hockey and basketball. Its prime suburban location just outside the Capitol Beltway made the center accessible, expansive, and built to serve a growing regional fan base. For hockey, the Capitol Center was foundational. It became the first home of the Washington Capitals, who joined the NHL in the 1974-75 season. The team struggled early, but the arena gave them legitimacy. In 1982, it hosted the NHL All-Star Game, but it wasn't until 1987 when Capitol Center became host to a legendary battle. Starting on April 18th and ending in the early hours of the 19th, the Capitals and New York Islanders played the longest Game 7 match in the Stanley Cup playoff history. It would become known as the Easter Epic. The Capitol Center became the blueprint on how modern supported sports, integrated technology can really improve the overall fan experience. But all things eventually become obsolete. Newer venues offered better amenities, downtown access, and competitive edge. In 1997, both the Capitals and the Bullets, now known as the Wizards, moved to a new arena in downtown DC. The Capitol Center was closed in 2002 and was demolished that December. It was a pioneer, a proving ground, and really a home for hockey's rise in Washington. Its legacy lives on in the arena design across NHL arenas. The Detroit Olympia, or the Old Red Barn as fans and locals called it, stood proudly at the corner of Grand River and McGraw from 1927 to 1979. It wasn't just an arena, it was a red brick cathedral of hockey. It was a cornerstone of Detroit's identity, and where the Detroit Cougars, soon renamed the Red Wings, carved their legend into NHL history. The Olympia was constructed in the late 1920s and designed by theater architect C. Howard Crane. When it opened, it was one of the largest indoor arenas in the world, second only to Madison Square Garden and London's Olympia. It was designed in a Romanesque revival featuring arch windows, terracotta trim, and a bold central arch that eventually bore the Red Wings emblems like a badge of honor. Inside, the arena was steep and intimate. 5 levels of 15,000 seats wrapped tightly around the ice, placing fans thrillingly close to the action. Beneath, the concrete floors was a massive refrigeration system that kept the ice crisp. And it was here that the Red Wings found their stride. The Olympia hosted its first Stanley Cup win and became the stage for some of the most dominant eras in NHL history. The 1950s belonged to what was called the production line, made up of Gordie Howe, Sid Abel, and Ted Lindsay. Lindsay led Detroit to 4 cups and 7 consecutive first-place finishes. The 1952 championship sparked a tradition as quirky as it was iconic, and we mentioned it earlier in the video, the octopus toss. 8 wins were needed to claim the cup, and fans began throwing octopuses onto the ice, and the ritual still lives on to this day. Sadly, the magic that made the Detroit Olympia came to an end when the Red Wings moved to the Joe Louis Arena in 1979, and not long afterwards the Olympia would be demolished in 1986. The original Olympia letters now hang at Little Caesars Arena, which is a quiet tribute to the barn where legends were originally born. Each venue, distinct in architecture and atmosphere, helped shape the emotional and cultural identity of hockey in its region. From Prairie Devotion in Winnipeg to the dynastic Roar of Detroit to the Southern Experiment in Atlanta, these buildings offered more than seats and ice. They offered intimacy, innovation, and belonging. Though many have been demolished or replaced, their impact endures in the traditions they sparked, the legends they house, and the memories they etched into the hearts of fans. Yeah, I would just absolutely love to know if any of you have been to these arenas, so let us know in the comments below and maybe which ones you missed the most. Until next time, thank you for watching.